How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Back here today on a Monday, January 27th. Now, we finally know who the two teams will be representing each conference in the Super Bowl. We got the Chiefs representing the AFC and the Eagles coming out of the NFC. The matchup that we weren't necessarily too excited for, but it's the one that I think was the most obvious to happen. So, with that being the case, we're going to go into this past Sunday, yesterday, and talk about the games, reviewing them, and just giving our thoughts on what we saw from each of the conference games. Also, we're going to be bringing up some more coaching news around the NFL. Brian Schottenheimer obviously being named the Cowboys head coach. We'll talk about that, and also some head coaching news elsewhere, as well as bringing up the Steelers and their progression with Russell Wilson and just that entire quarterback situation in general with their owner, talking a little bit more today as well. So all of that stuff is coming up on today's show, and before we get started, a typical reminder for you guys, if you guys want to get involved with the show with any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to do so, because your input, insight always provides us with a lot at the start, but also, just gives a different perspective on anything we're talking about, and it's interesting to know what you guys are also thinking. So whether it's, again, a question, opinion, or just any comment, if you want to make it absolutely sure that it stands out and gets featured on any of the shows, there's an easy way to do that just by using the Super Chat feature. Click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets seen by me. I'll read it out loud. It gets featured on the show, and that way we're able to carry the conversation potentially in a different direction, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, get involved with the show, use the Super Chat feature, and click the $ and just let us know what's on your mind whenever you guys are able and are wanting to ask a question or anything like that. So with that being the case, we're going to start off with, I would say the biggest piece of news in regards to head coaching around the NFL. A lot of news has been coming out over the last few days, whether it be Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, being hired to their respective jobs. Liam Cohen, another one that got pretty crazy towards the end of last week as well. But on that topic, on the end of last week, that was when we officially got the news, I believe after we went off the air on this show, that Brian Schottenheimer, the former offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, was being promoted and hired as their new head coach. And actually today, the Cowboys held the introductory press conference for Brian Schottenheimer, and I don't have any quotes or anything like that because this is still the initial stage of it, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it more throughout the week. But the Brian Schottenheimer era started today, right? Today officially was the start of this, and I'm sure he went into, the overview and everything like that of the position, where the Cowboys are right now, and all the sort of good stuff, right? And, this was something that really picked up steam at the end of last week, where they were saying things like, it would be a surprise that if by the end of Friday they didn't make an announcement like this, and I wanted to believe it, or actually that's a lie. I didn't want to believe it because I wasn't a big fan of this move, but it felt like a lot of reports, a lot of sources were pretty adamant that this was going to get done sooner rather than later, and lo and behold, it was to the end of the week that we saw this officially become, cemented as a real, as a reality, as an actual possibility. So, Dallas, didn't really venture too far after they parted with Mike McCarthy. And, it was said that Jerry and Mike McCarthy couldn't agree on a length of a potential new deal. Their search really didn't go that far, other than a lot of close relationships with Jerry Jones and the organization. You talk about Robert Saleh, Leslie Frazier, Kellen Moore, Dion, all these guys pretty close relationship with Jerry Jones. So, and also Brian Schottenheimer, obviously, who was already there. So, a lot of guys that aren't really so much of a reach, aren't really so much of a risk for the Dallas Cowboys. So they kept it pretty close. And at the end of the day, they just promoted from within. And if you aren't aware, Brian Schottenheimer has been involved with the NFL mostly all of his life. He's the son of the late Marty Schottenheimer. And, it goes back to he's been, really involved and really been in a position like this in 2018 and 2020 when he was calling plays back then for the Seattle Seahawks. But since then, he really hasn't been in that role. And once he was brought in by Dallas in 2022 to be their offensive coordinator, even still, he was not calling plays for them. It was still Mike McCarthy, but Brian Schottenheimer was in there, was involved with running, maintaining the offense, I would say, and his strong relationship with Dak and, the familiarity of still having Schottenheimer around was thought to be a big reason why they just promoted from within rather than, completely stripping everything down and restarting completely. They decided to keep some relationship, some form of continuity in the organization. So that's really where, the logic stands with bringing in Brian Schottenheimer, to have some sort of continuation there with the team from last year. And although that might be true and it sounds logical, right? One thing fans won't be a fan of, though, is that, last week, one of the things that was brought up was that Brian Schottenheimer was not really being sought after, in a sense, right? He wasn't really getting any attention from other teams wanting to interview him or anything like that. So, no team has wanted to interview Brian Schottenheimer actually since 2013, and that was the Jacksonville Jaguars. So since that time, you're talking about like almost 12 years now, and that was a pretty big red flag for a lot of people. I'm assuming Cowboys fans in this regard, just because you're bringing in this guy, or you're talking about bringing in Brian Schottenheimer, and not that it matters what other teams, other people are doing directly, and how it involves you, but you do get a sense, or you do get a tell of how not good he is as a coordinator or anything like that, but just how much you can base a lot off of, the general public, right? If the general public or most people are going after something or all saying the same thing about something, not that it's absolute fact, but you can get a good sense of what is true and what is not true when a good amount of people are saying the same thing, right? At some point you got to think, all right, well, if so many people are doing something or not doing something, in this case with Schottenheimer, why is that? What level of truth is there in that? And, that's really kind of where we stand right now with that, the Cowboys and Brian Schottenheimer. And then just overall, I mean, I'm not a big fan of it. Not really too excited. Pretty disappointed, honestly. And I guess that's my own fault, right, for thinking that the Cowboys would do anything other than just be content with what they've got going on. I thought a rough year, like a year they're just coming off of with injuries and just really not playing too well, I thought that would be something to kind of kickstart them to really take an initiative this year and try and do something different. I don't know, usually when you perform that bad, like you fail a test or something like that, you'd think that the next test to come around, you'd study harder or you'd do something differently, right? Because obviously what you've been doing has not been working, right? So instead of doing the exact same thing and sticking to your norms, I thought, like anything else probably in life, you would try and do something different, try and shake things up. But the Cowboys, were just acting accordingly, I guess, to what we've been accustomed to. They're a team that punts on 4th and inches when they're down by 3 points on barely the other side of the halfway line, and it's 4th down. They punt each and every time, right? They're not going to give you anything too exciting. They're going to stick to their norms, play it safe, it seems, each and every decision that they make. And yeah, I mean, that's where we stand. I'm sure that's the general feeling on this hire by the Cowboys. And in regards to anybody else, I guess for the Cowboys, which is pretty unlike them, to wait until the very end and maybe wait for Kellen Moore, I thought that was understandable to an extent, but the Cowboys putting everything off so long, I thought that'd be something they'd be willing to do. Considering Kellen Moore and the success he's had in Philadelphia, I thought he was the one that they would go for instead, but instead they settled for Brian Schottenheimer. They acted quickly. Don't really understand why, because again, it's not like a lot of people were interviewing him, so I didn't understand the rush. I credited them because, they were being proactive, but not for a decision like this. And I don't know what needs to happen for this team to kind of realize that they're not as close as they think they are to being a contending team. Because if you make a move like this, I feel like you're coming off of a playoff run, of a divisional run, and you don't want to change too many things. But this is a team that had one of their worst years over the last 5 years, and they think that just upgrading a guy from offensive coordinator who wasn't even calling the plays is going to make a huge difference, right, from 7-10. I don't really see that happening, but I don't want to completely disrespect Brian Schottenheimer. I don't know too much about him and his play calling abilities, but the way it's lined up, all the facts laid out in front of you, it doesn't seem like a risk worth taking, really, at the end of the day. So I don't think this is an improvement on Mike McCarthy at all. And if it's not an improvement, I don't understand why you would even move on from him if this was going to be the case. And what it says about the Cowboys and Jerry Jones is that, to me, that they're willing to settle for just a participation medal, just hanging around the rim like they always like to say, and that they're settling for just selling a false hope, a false dream out to their fans. And I guess that's something that's become a custom over there in Dallas. But instead of taking like a gamble, being uncomfortable or taking an uncomfortable decision to try and shake things up, they settled. They went with the safe option. And if not anything, it just ensures that the way things are being run there, no one's going to challenge Jerry, and things are just going to continue to be run as they have been for the good part of, what is it now, like the last almost 30 years or something like that. So it's unfortunate, but I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. And now Brian Schottenheimer, he had his introductory press conference today and everything like that. And I'm sure we'll discuss more about it over the next few days. But we are officially now in the Brian Schottenheimer era. So we'll see where this goes for the Dallas Cowboys. But in terms of the show, we're going to move on and start talking about the conference games. The first one up is on the AFC side, the night game, the main event between the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. A lot went into this game. We're going to review everything that went down on the Bills and Chiefs side when we return after this.